So, I would like to spend our time this morning on the topic, as I put it on your sheet, of the image of God, how to forgive. But I want to focus on two questions which inform how we forgive as we approach Yom Kippur. The first, the Torah describes human beings as being created famously in God's image. So I want to know what that means. That'll be our first point. And then second, how does that affect the way we deal with each other before Yom Kippur and all year round? There's something about this, the idea of being created in Tselem Elokim, that actually has great ramifications for this time of year and beyond. So I brought you an interesting source to start with. A fellow by the name of David Kleins. David Kleins is a British biblical scholar, and he writes, "Humankind is the one godlike creature in all the created order." When you look at Bereshit, when you look at the creation of the animals and the birds and the fish and so on, we're the only ones who are listed as in any way or described in any way as being associated with God. Its nature is not understood if it is viewed merely as the most highly developed of the animals with whom it shares the earth. Right? If you just say human being is the most advanced form of animal, you haven't comprehended what it means to be godlike. Nor is it perceived if it is seen as an infinitesimal being dwarfed by the enormous magnitude of the universe. If you look at us as really small in the face of the big universe, again, so then what's godlike about us at all? By the concept of the image of God, Genesis affirms the dignity and worth of humanity and elevates all humans, not just kings or nobles, to the highest status conceivable short of complete divinization. Which I didn't think was a word, but my spell check didn't call me on it, so I don't know. His meaning is clear. He didn't want to say divination because that means something else, so he ended up with divinization. But his point is that by saying that we are created in the image of God, it demonstrates, it confirms, or affirms as he puts it, the dignity and worth of humanity, and it elevates us to the highest status conceivable short of being God. But what he hasn't done is to explain what that image of God actually is. What is this status that we've been given? In what way is it higher than all the other creatures? What does it actually mean? So I brought you some sources here that we could use. But before we see the sources that I brought, what does it mean to you? When the Torah says we are created b'tselem Elokim, which we keep translating as in the image of God, and that's pretty much the standard translation that people give. What does that mean to you?
Well, it's not the physical image to me. To me, it's not the physical image.
Right. How do you know that?
God has no image.
Right. So here we have a problem of scholastic history here, which is we approach a biblical text through the eyes of the Rambam, even though the Rambam wasn't around when the text was written. Meaning, we grew up with Yigdal. Ein lo demut haguf. God doesn't have a body. We grew up with the idea that, of course, God doesn't have a body. The Rambam makes the point that God does not have a body because philosophically it's inconceivable. Because as the Greeks taught, once there is a physical form, that means it will deteriorate at some point. Right? It also means that it is divisible. Everything physical can be broken down into smaller parts. Right? When I was in school, they taught us, well, there are atoms that can't be broken down, but of course we learned that's not true. Right? As you get older, you learn more about that. But the Rambam's point, saying that God does not have a body, was not universally held in Judaism. There were those who were not impressed by the philosophical argument. Ravad, Rabbi Avram ben David, comments on the Rambam when the Rambam says that it's heresy to believe that God has a physical form. Ravid says, greater people than you thought that God does have a physical form. So there. And there are biblical verses that seem to support it, that the Rambam then has to reread as metaphor and so on. I'm not disagreeing with you, nor am I disagreeing with the Rambam. My point is only that we jump to, Tselem Elokim can't mean physical form because we've been so indoctrinated to believe that there's no such thing as a physical form associated with God.
The word Tselem also doesn't really mean the exact form. The word Tselem sort of gives you a feeling of some kind of reflection of something.
Like what Tselem is not the actual, it's a picture of.
Well, tselem is used to refer to a form of something. Yeah, when we use it today for a photograph and a camera as a matzlama, we're creating an image that looks like, the original matzlama created a physical image. It's only the digital matzlama that isn't really creating an image at all. It's just.
Right, but it's not the actual item, it's the image of the.
Right. No, but it's something that when you look at it, you will see something that looks like the original. Yeah. Fern or Diane, someone here.
No, I was commenting. You said image of God, not having physical. Wasn't also part of it as a response to Christianity, where they view Jesus as a God, he has a physical form.
So it doesn't, right. So our allergy to the idea of a physical form to God does not seem to come from the problem of Christianity, given that I would have expected, if so, to find the Gemara itself weigh in and say God has no physical form, because they're dealing with the early Christians. I would have expected the Gaonim, perhaps they're really dealing in a more of a Muslim world, so maybe they didn't feel the pressure to. But the Rambam certainly doesn't have Christian pressure on him.
But image and form are two different things. An image is still something that we perceive. It's not something that we can touch.
I'm not so sure. I think that's because of the English word that we use as opposed to the Hebrew. I think tselem really is something tangible. So Rashi thinks tselem is indeed something physical. Rashi's solution is to instead retranslate the invisible word between tselem and Elokim. Meaning, you're missing a word there. In Hebrew, that's fine. Tselem Elokim. In English, we have the word of. Right? You're missing a piece. You can't say image God. It's image of God. So Rashi says, of is a funny word. He's not speaking English at all. Rashi is speaking Old French. But he notes that Tselem Elokim doesn't have to mean God's image that is God, so to speak. Rather, it's the image designed by God. If you take a look at number 2, I gave you the pasuk with a translation where I translated it based on what Rashi says. Vayomer Elokim, and God said, Na'aseh Adam b'tzalamenu kidmusenu. Let us, I'm not discussing the us there, that's its own discussion, but let us make man in the tselem and demut, image and form, we have designed. The image that we have designed, not the image of me, not the image of God, as in it looks like God, but the image designed by God. And God created man in His image, meaning the image that God had designed.
So how does that differ from every other creation? God had designed what a cow will look like.
Precisely the problem. Right? That's the problem. So in that case, we're no different. And the answer would have to be that what Rashi is reading here is the fact that the Torah actually stresses this was an image selected by God means there must be something unique about it. And the text doesn't say what it is, but there's something unique and special about that human image. That's one approach. Malbim gives what I think of as one of the more famous approaches. It must predate him. But I brought you Malbim because I found it and I thought, this is a very nice, concise way to put it. Yesh lo koach ha-bechira v'choshiyut. He says a human being has the power of free choice. We have freedom. Shaydei zen nivra b'tselem Elokim, such that we are created in the tselem Elokim, and he quotes the verse, Na'aseh Adam b'tsalmenu, let us make man in our image. And he says, V'chein yeser kochos nafsho shemit alim, al kochos nefesh yeser balei chayim. And so the other powers of his spirit that are higher than those of other creatures. So whatever we have in our spirit that is higher than what animals have, that's Tselem Elokim. In whatever way human beings have some level of superiority, starting with free will and continuing to other attributes. But it's a spiritual attribute.
What about the mention יד חזקה, זרוע נטויה, and we
Right, so that's what I had said. Right.
to listen, to hear us, so...
Right. So that's right. So that's what I said the Rambam explains as being allegory. He says it clearly doesn't mean a hand. No one saw a hand. It means force, as we express in terms of hands, because that's the way we speak. That's the way the Rambam deals with it. Rabbi Chaim of Volozhin, in his Nefesh HaChaim, offers another approach. He says, yeah.
I kind of want to know why is it sometimes in the plural?
Right, so I don't want to go into a huge length, but basically the word Elokim is itself plural. The word Elokim, which is the name of God that's used there, Vayomer Elokim, is a plural word. It means possessor of all of the powers. The Elokim is the one who has every possible strength. The word Kael, which is at the base of Elokim, means power. Elokim, the God with all of the powers. So it's really a plural word. So by definition, the same way that Mayim is a plural word and there's no singular, that's why we look at Elokim. And so it's not saying that there's more than one God. It's simply saying all the powers. That's one way to look at it.
The name that starts with the tzaddik, also in a plural.
Yeah, well, all the names of God, meaning Aleph, Dalet, Nun, Yud, is also a plural name. They are our masters, literally. Some will read it as simply the royal we. As opposed to what I'm saying about all the different powers, it's just the royal we. And then you have the classic medrash that says that God speaks to the angels and doesn't need to consult them, but he does so in order to teach us some humility. There are all sorts of different explanations for why. So Rabbi Chaim of Volozhin in number 4 says that it's about power. The power that God gave us, that's Tselem Elokim. He says, he says, don't get hung up on the words Tselem and Demut. It's not what it sounds like. He doesn't tell you the Rambam as his basis for saying God doesn't have an image. He says, the Pasuk says, what image could you compare to God? Which he takes to mean God doesn't have an image. Right? In the same way that when the Torah says, you didn't see any image at Har Sinai, therefore don't make images of God, so that's cited as a source to show God doesn't have an image. Right? That's another verse that's popularly quoted. Ela perusho dimyon ma be'ezeh davar. But it means some comparison to God. There's some similarity of some kind. And what is it? So he says, Shem Elokim, just like I was just saying to you, Violet. He says, Shem Elokim yadua perushoshu moreshu yisbarach shemo bala kochos kulam. He says, we know. Elokim means the one who possesses all powers. Kmo be'ez brias ha'olamos, kulam bara'am ve'imtziam hu yisbarach yesh me'ayin. Like when God created all the worlds, He created all of them something from nothing. Bara hu yisbarach as ha'adam. He created humanity. Ve'shlito al ribei rivavan kochos va'olamos ein mispar. And He gave us power over all of these different forces and realms. Our actions influence and affect the whole universe. That's the power that's been given to us. Okay, so that's another idea. But the one that I wanted to get to is from Rav Moshe Cordovero. Rav Moshe Cordovero, just a little bit of background, was a student of Rav Yosef Karo, the Beis Yosef, author of the Shulchan Aruch, in Tzfat in the 16th century. Rabbi Yosef Karo is best known as the author of the Kesef Mishnah commentary to the Rambam, the Beis Yosef commentary to the Tur, and the Shulchan Aruch, which are all serious halachic works. But there's another side to Rabbi Yosef Karo. He was also a very serious mystic, a very serious Kabbalist. That's not unique to him. Meaning many of the greatest halachic authorities we had were also mystics. Ramban, Nachmanides did it in the 13th century. It is even argued that the Rambam had a mystical side. It's a very interesting debate as to whether there's mysticism in the Rambam. There certainly is philosophy, whether there was mysticism. But the Beis Yosef, Rabbi Yosef Karo, was also a mystic, and Rabbi Cordovero, in his Pardes Rimonim mystical work, attributes his understanding of the Sfirot, how God influences the universe, to Rabbi Yosef Karo. and quotes from a work called Magid Meisharim, which is attributed to Rabbi Yosef Karo, which is a heavily mystical work with its own backstory. So Rav Moshe Cordovero was the youngest of 4 to receive smicha from the Ma'ari Beirav. You may be familiar with the fact that smicha today is not what it once was. Smicha, traditionally, going back to Moshe, was supposed to be teacher to student directly in person. Moshe puts his hands on Yehoshua. That's smicha, to put your hands on. And it was supposed to be done, a teacher to student, and it conferred a certain level of authority within Jewish law. It wasn't simply that. It was certification that says, okay, you studied the books and you know what you're doing. But it actually conveyed certain powers. It was a judicial position, really, such that if you think of, like, you have a bench, right? You have where the judges sit, and you only can create a new judge if there's a seat available for the judge. There's no such thing as a judge without a spot on the bench. There's no judge at large. That's the way smicha used to be. So there were no rabbis at large. There was a position in a certain community to be able to give halachic rulings. There was a need to fill that position, so then they would give somebody smicha. That stops in the Roman times. The Romans put a halt to smicha by killing everybody, basically. The Romans created an edict saying that if you give somebody smicha, we find out about it, and remember, it's done in a beis din, so there are people around to hear and to be able to talk. So they said, we will execute whoever gave the smicha, we will execute whoever received the smicha, and we will execute the Jewish population of the nearest town. And that puts an end to smicha as it was. What we end up with instead is just certification. Saying, okay, you studied the course of study, you did proper training, okay, we believe you can now give halachic rulings. It doesn't carry the powers that it once did. There was an attempt, though, in the 16th century to resurrect smicha. The Rambam writes that it could be, you could make the argument that if all the sages in Israel, I forget if he says all or most, would get together and agree on somebody to receive smicha, Mashiach would come. No, then that would actually be effective. That would be the way to restart smicha. And on that basis, the Ma'ari Beirav, one of the leading rabbis of the 16th century, conferred smicha on 4 people. Rabbi Yosef Karo was one, Rabbi MordechaI was another, Rabbi Moshe Galanti was a third, and Rabbi Moshe Cordovero was the youngest of the 4. It did not endure because there was a big dispute between the rabbis of Tiberia and the rabbis of Yerushalayim. It didn't work out. But he was the teacher of the Ari, and of Rav Chaim Vital, who became the lead student of the Ari. He died months after the Ari arrived in Tzfat in 1570. The Ari claims that the Ramak, Rav Moshe Cordovero, was pure of sin, and he died only because of the fact that once Adam and Chava ate from the fruit, all human beings had to be mortal. But otherwise he wouldn't have died. He wrote the Ornei Rav, the Pardes Rimonim, the Tomer Devora, and what we're going to be doing is we're going to be learning Tomer Devora here. This is what we're drawing on. So take a look at source number 5. He says, Ikar hatselem v'hademus ha'elyon hein pe'ulosav. He says, you want to know what Tselem and Demut of God are? They are God's deeds, His actions. In other words, Tselem Elokim means the actions of God, the attributes that God brings into the actions that He performs. It is when human beings are created, B'Tselem Elokim, it means that we are created not to look like God in terms of our physical form, but to look like God in terms of our behavior. That's the idea. If you look at source number 6, I quoted you the pasuk, V'halachta bidrachav. We are supposed to walk in God's ways. There's a Gemara in Shabbos in source number 7, when the Torah says, the Jews say at the sea, Zek heli ve'anvehu, this is my God, and I will glorify Him. So the Gemara says, Havei domelo. That means you have to resemble God. Mahu chanun v'rachum, afata heye chanun v'rachum. God is gracious and merciful, that's what you have to be also. That's what Rav Moshe Cordovero believes is what it means to be in the image of God. However, he doesn't take it as a description of man. He takes it as an imperative for man. This is a command to be B'Tselem Elokim. It's not just that you have potential, but it's actually an obligation. And take a look at source number 8, where I quote you from the Tomer Devorah. There is a translation out into English, by the way, I think it's Feldheim, that may be worth reading for those who are interested in the Sefer. But Rav Moshe Cordovero writes the following. Ha'adam ra'ui sheyisdameh lekono. It would be fitting, or it is fitting, for a person to resemble his creator. Note that it says Ha'adam. Rabbi Yitzchak Cohen, my Rebbe from many years ago in MTA, notes it says Ha'adam. Meaning? No. It means every human being. Jew and non-Jew alike. Every human being is created to be ra'ui. He is suited. Sheyizdameh lekono. To resemble his creator. In other words, it's in everyone's potential. Besod hatzura ha'elyona. And then that person will carry that higher form. Tselem udemut, the tselem, the demut, she'ilu yedumeh begufo v'lo bepi'ulot. And I heard a shir from Rav Moshe Weinberger, who is the source for quite a bit of what I'm going to say here. I don't remember how much anymore because I heard the shir years ago. But I remember that I was very influenced by it at the time that I was learning this. He says, she'ilu yedumeh begufo v'lo bepi'ulot. He says, if a person were to resemble God in his form, in his body, meaning, if we were to have all the potentials that are supposed to be built into us to resemble God, but our actions would not do so, harehu machziv hatzuras, then you're making your form into a lie. Your form broadcasts to the world that you're capable of being godlike, but you're not. V'yomru alav, and they will say of him, tzura na umasim keurim, looks beautiful, but his deeds are ugly. Because the essential, and this is what I quoted in number 5 above, the essence of the higher tzelem and demut are in his actions. What good is it for you to be like this higher form? Demus tavnis evarav, to have the form of God's limbs, so to speak. But your actions don't resemble God. He says, this imposes upon us a great expectation that you're going to live up to having Tselem Elokim. So, with this idea, we've answered the first question, first of all, of what does it mean to be in God's image? It means to have the potential to emulate God. But what I want to do with this is to apply it to the idea of forgiveness and to suggest that forgiveness is not about the other person. It's a common conception that I should forgive someone who has done something to me because it's the right thing to do to them. And that's not, that's not a wrong idea. The Shulchan Aruch talks about not being cruel to others by refusing to forgive. So it's not, it's not as though that's wrong. But forgiveness is also about being our best selves. Wait, hang on. It's also about being our best selves. It's about being God-like. I should forgive because God forgives, right? Yonah, as an example, right? There are many examples in Tanakh, but Yonah, is in the air right now. But that's the idea, is that forgiveness is part of being God-like. Yes.
So if we are emulating or mimicking the attributes of God, then we can be angry, we can be jealous.
Right. So I was going to point this out before. The Gemara that talks about Zakeli Vanvehu and so on only speaks about emulating what we think of as the nice side. I believe that's because the others are a lot harder to apply. Or I should say to apply properly. It's easy to be angry.
Where do you draw the line?
But I think that's the idea is that when you're dealing with the nice ones, being generous and gracious and giving and merciful and forgiving and so on, so let's say I get it wrong. What's the big deal? If you're going to, on the other hand, insist that you're now the judge, right? And you get that wrong, now you have real trouble. So we stick to the ones that we can safely emulate. The truth is, one can go wrong by being generous and giving and so on inappropriately. I could squander the resources I have been given to give to people properly and use them improperly. It's not that there's no penalty or no price to getting it wrong, but I think that the downside is a lot smaller on that side than it is on the other. Yeah.
Can you define forgiving? I don't understand it on a personal level.
Yes. Forgiving, to me, and we're going to see some of it here as part of the discussion, is to view it as though what the person did to you never happened.
What about forgive yourself?
Forgiving yourself is also important. Rabbi Papo in his Pele Yoet talks about chesed, and he says the most important chesed, the most important kindness, is the one that you exercise with yourself. One does need to do that. The trick when you're dealing with yourself as opposed to others is that you're also responsible for yourself. In other words, I can forgive somebody else. If somebody speaks Lashon Hara about me, if somebody does something bad to me, I can forgive them and hope that they're going to get their act together at some point. But if I'm going to forgive myself for speaking Lashon Hara, who's going to call me to task? Who's going to make me improve? So I'm playing both sides when I'm dealing with myself.
Your own conscience, your own...
But once you forgave, it's gone. It's like it never happened. Now what happens? Now who's going to be responsible? That's the trick. It's a lot harder when you're dealing with yourself.
You try not to do that again.
You sort of start with a clean slate and start again. It's like as if you're new.
Yeah, but you have to correct what you've done wrong. Otherwise, you're just going to do it again.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You start again, and that you're not going to do.
Right.
You that's gone. That was in the past, and now you're not going to do it again.
Right. There's also another problem with forgiving yourself, and that is really forgiveness is the property of the victim. If I do something wrong, it is true that I have, in a way, harmed myself, lowered myself, certainly, trained myself to do bad things, certainly, brought myself in for punishment, potentially. So there is an element of, I hurt myself and I can forgive that. But I can't forgive myself on behalf of the people I hurt. So that's another key distinction.
You can forgive yourself, but you also have to ask forgiveness from the person hurt.
Yep. Okay. All true. Okay, so what does it mean to learn forgiveness from God? What am I talking about in practice? So I brought you here in source number 9 a text which is likely familiar. These are 3 psukim from the end of the book of Micha, which is one of the Trayasar, the book of the collection of 12 small books of Nevi'im. Those will be in the Bayit this Yom Kippur. I will be giving a shir during the break between Musaf and Mincha for a few hours. We'll be talking about, it'll be a few hours at my minyan, shorter from other minyanim. But we'll be going through the themes of each of the 12 of Trayasar. So it won't be recorded. In the Molesky base matters, where my minyan is. My minyan. It will not be recorded. It's where the kollel usually is.
Somewhere.
Opposite the office.
Is that more space?
Yeah, there's space. There's plenty of space.
People are sleeping.
Yes, that's also true. This is also true. Not half.
No, I'm exaggerating.
Some of the people are sleeping. This is good. This is a part of the service that is so the psukim here from Micha appear in our liturgy twice. Tashlech is one, because they are the source for the practice of Tashlech in its most basic form when the pasuk says, you shall cast into the depths of the seas all of their sins, right? We ask God to throw our sins into the sea. It's not about us throwing anything into the water. Please do not throw anything into the water. It is about God throwing the sins into the water. And then the other correct is after we read Yonah as the Haftorah at Mincha on Yom Kippur, we end with these 3 psukim. So the psukim go as follows, source number 9. Mi keo kamocha, who is powerful like you, God? Nosei avon, ve'over al pesha, lish eris nachalaso. You pardon avon, I translated here as iniquity, just because I needed different words for sin. Ve'over al pesha, you overlook. I'm going to have to retranslate overlook as we go along, but we'll go with it for now. Overlook transgression, lish eris nachlaso, for the remnant of his heritage, lo hechazik la'ad apo, he does not maintain his wrath forever, ki chafetz chesed, who he desires kindness. Yashuv Yenachamenu Yichbosh Avonoseinu. He will once again show us mercy. He will suppress our avon, our iniquity. V'tashlich v'mitzvos yam kochatosam. You, God, will cast all their sins into the depths of the sea. He goes from third person, right, to second person. He was talking about God before. Now he addresses God directly. You will cast their sins into the depths of the sea. Grant truth to Jacob, kindness to Avraham, as you swore to our forefathers in days of old. There's a lot to say about these psukim, but we're not teaching these psukim right now. I gave a shir on Micha years ago, and you can find it on YU Torah, and there you'll find a discussion about why, for example, Yitzchak is skipped. But I bring these here because in Tomer Devorah, Rav Moshe Cordovero uses these attributes, these psukim, as the basis for 13 attributes of divine mercy. Instead of the classic source, which is Moshe, right, after the Egel, after the golden calf, instead he uses these psukim. So Rabbi Weinberger says that it's because the Zohar in Parshas Naso and in Parshas Emor says that the 13 attributes we recite, the ones that come from Moshe after the Egel, those are the lower set of divine mercy. The Rahmana Elyon, the higher mercy, is what's seen here in these verses. How do you know that? What's your indication of that? So I wrote something here, and I don't know if this came from Rabbi Weinberger or if this was my own idea. But the difference between the two is that Moshe's version comes after the golden calf. It's a time of atoning for the golden calf just to keep us alive. That's what God teaches Moshe with those 13 attributes of mercy. Micha, on the other hand, is actually describing the period of Geula, of redemption, the time of Mashiach, when he describes this. So this is about redemption. It's not the lower level of God, don't kill them. It's the higher level of God, bring them redemption. It's you're getting more with these. So Rav Moshe Cordovero uses these to describe how Hashem's mercy works and how His forgiveness works. And what we're going to do is go through the first 3 of the 13 using his analysis. Clear? So these psukim are the basis for the 13 as he reads it. We're going to see the first 3, which are first, Mikael Kamocha, who is a God like you, is his first of the 13. Nosei Avon, the fact that God, I translated here as pardons iniquity, but as we're going to see, it's more than just to pardon. And then the third one that we'll get to is Over al Pesha. The Over al Pesha, which also translated here as overlooks transgressions, but there's more to say about that as well. Okay. Our first one is Mikael Kamocha. Who is God like you? Or who is powerful like you?
What is this Kel? What? I don't know.
So Kel is Aleph Lamed in the original, but Aleph Lamed, El is God. I translated it here as powerful because it can be read as just the word meaning powerful, in which case it's not a name of God at all, but it could also be read as the name of God, and that's why I did it with the kuf. So Rav Moshe Cordovero writes the following, and here I just brought you an excerpt out of the paragraphs that he has on this. Me'olam lo chata adam negdo, shelo yeh hu ba'oso harega mamash, shofea shafa kiyumo utnuas evarav. He says, no one ever sinned against God without God simultaneously giving him the energy that he uses in order to be able to move into sin. Right? If we believe, as Judaism teaches, that everything that exists is created and supported in an ongoing way by God, then when a person does something wrong, when the thief is slipping something out of somebody's pocket, when someone is speaking Lashon Hara, whatever it is that you envision as somebody's Aveira, at the moment they're doing it, where do they get the energy from? They're getting it from God.
What happened to free will?
What do you mean? They're still making the decision.
It's not stopping.
The point is only that they're drawing on resources. You know, it's the kid who is sent off to school with the parents' credit card, right? And uses the credit card for all the things they told him don't do it.
So
Right.
God puts this in front of us, and we choose.
We make a choice.
Yeah.
How are you going to resolve free will overall in divine knowledge and predestination is totally not this class. They maybe that should be 3 hours on Yom Kippur afternoon. Let everybody fall asleep. But the image that's the image here is that when the person does something wrong, they are drawing on divine credit to do so. And even though the person is sitting with that strength, God doesn't keep it from him. God endures this shame, this humiliation, effectively, of being misused in this way. And Rabbi Weinberger, when he discussed this, caught on the word sovel. What does the word sovel remind you of in Hebrew? Savlanut, right? Patience. And what is a sabal? A porter, exactly. Someone who carries stuff, right? There's another word, sevel, which is suffering. But it's more than just patience. It's to carry. I translated here as to endure. That was the best that I could do in terms of a good English word for it. But what he's describing here is for God to be sovel, to endure what we are doing. And if you take a look at source number 11, Ramban gives us a definition of divine love that uses this word as well. He's commenting on a pasuk that speaks about Hashem being choshek us, loving our ancestors. So he says, Hanivchar le'ohev, the best kind of beloved, hu hayadua lisbol es ohavo b'chol haba alav mimenu, is somebody who is known to endure, there's the word, lisbol, to endure the one that he loves, with everything that happens from him, no matter what that person does. V'Yisrael re'uyim lekach mikol am, and we are more suited for this than any nation. K'moshe Amru, as the Gemara says, Shlosha azim heim. There are 3 creatures who are identified as az, meaning strong but also bold. Yisrael ba'umos, and it's the Jews among the nations. And now he explains what it is about this that makes us worthy of God being sovel us. Ki ya'amdu b'nisyonos, because we stand up to all the tests. O Yehudai, O Tsaluv. He quotes you a Medrash in Shmos Rabbah that the Jew says, either I will be a Jew or I will be crucified. But I'm not willing to give in on being a Jew. So he says, if the Jew is willing to be that devoted to God, then the Jew is worthy that God should be sovel us. That God should say, I'm never going to reject you.
So on Rosh Hashanah, the prayer of the Tokeh, it's Tokeh,
Unasana Tokeh?
Right.
Yeah.
That he was basically kind of crucified.
Oh, in that story.
Yeah.
I mean, he was murdered. I mean, in the classic story, right, which isn't.
It's not the same.
It's actually no. I mean, it's a great story, and in and of itself, it likely happened more than once in Jewish history. But as the origin for Nisana Tokef, it's likely not true. Rav J.J. Schachter did a lot of research on this years ago. It could be, but it's difficult because Nisana Tokef exists in manuscript form centuries before the time when Rav Amnon of Magenza was supposed to have lived. Now, that doesn't mean it could be he knew it from the manuscripts and he came back and taught it and so on.
Someone found a dream or something.
Yeah, so if you go on...
story in Pentateuch.
You never used to burn about mops?
Of course.
Look at the bottom of the page for Nisana Tokef. Yeah. Okay. When you're a kid and you use the Burma Moxer and you're looking for something to read as they're dragging out Nisana Tokef, you read that story. But if you go on YU Torah and you search for Amnon of Mainz or of Magensa, or if you look under Rabbi J.J. Shurim, you'll catch there the work that he did on this story.
Do you think, that the Christians picked up on this idea of like God suffering and sort of attributed it to Jesus, like Jesus is carrying our sins, kind of thing?
I don't know. I mean, they drew on Yeshaya. They didn't need this, you know.
Okay.
I mean, you do have. I didn't bring it here, but you have the pasuk Aniya Sisi V'Aniya Sani Es Bol Va'amaleit. Right? That's God saying, I will be Sovel. Mm-hmm. So you do have the psukim that use the word Sovel in reference to God. So you do have that. Yeah.
Suffer. Sovel isn't suffer.
Sorry?
Sovel.
They have it right here.
Suffer.
Yeah. No, but as a pasuk to trace it to that. The Maharsha, in source number 12, also talks about this Gemara that speaks about the Jews as being bold. And he says, what does it mean for us to be bold? When the text talks about the Jews being bold, lav hainu gevura, it doesn't refer to strength. But it means that we stand firm at our word and we do not recant for anybody. So that is the idea that the Jew is firm in the love for God, and God will be firm in that love for us. And that's what love is about. It's to be sovel the other person. I brought you an example of it, the Gemara in ve Mitzion, source number 13, which is not directly relevant, but I think it makes an important point for us. Ohev lifrok v'sonei lit'on. The Torah talks about the mitzvah of prika u'te'ina, which is the mitzvah that if you see somebody else's animal struggling under the burden, you're supposed to help unload it. Or if the guy's having trouble loading the animal, you're supposed to help him load the animal. But in one case, it talks about if you see your friend. In the other case, it talks about if you see your enemy. And either way, you're supposed to help. So the Gemara asks, so what if I could help my friend unburden his animal, or I can help my enemy load his animal? Which one should I choose? So he says, mitzvah b'sonei. The mitzvah is to help the enemy. Why? To control yourself, to force yourself to help the person who you didn't want to help. You know, to learn that kind of conduct. So Rav Moshe Cordovero takes this idea and extrapolates it from Mikhail Kamocha, from that opening set of words. Because Mikhail Kamocha says, who is God like you, but who is powerful like you, in the sense that you, God, are providing the strength. You're providing the ale, so to speak. You're providing the power with which the person sins. You have the ability to cut them off at any time, and you are sovel. You don't do it. And applying that for us, in terms of our forgiving, it's the idea of resembling God, being in the image of God, and forgiving as a function of being sovel in a relationship with somebody else. Now, I have to stress here, it's very, very important to note, that this isn't talking about in an abusive situation. That doesn't mean that people have to suffer the abuse of others and say, well, I'm being sovel, so I'm just going to live with it and tolerate it and all that. It doesn't work that way. The difference between us and God is that for all God is sovel, God is never going to get hurt. Whatever it is that somebody's doing, whatever terrible deed somebody does, God is never going. He may suffer for it in the sense that it's this elbon, it's this shame of He's supporting us and we're still sinning. But fundamentally, you're never going to take anything away from God. God is not going to die. God isn't going to feel any sort of physical harm. A person who is suffering from others has to protect themselves. That's number one. Number two, you have to be smart in how you're sovel. Right? When it comes to parenting, it's a very tricky balance because children need discipline. But this is from Rabbi Warrenberger. He says a parent has to be careful. The parent should never refuse to be sovel. The child has to know that the parent will continue to be sovel, that the parent will never disengage from the child. That's I think, a very important lesson in this. Okay, so that's Mikel Kamocha. We learn from God that just as God does not disengage, but God continues to endure and to support the person who is sinning, that's our duty when we forgive. Number 2, nosei avon. So nosei avon, I translated in number 9 as who pardons iniquity. But what does it mean to be nosei? Carry. So what does it mean in the context of carrying sin? How does that work? So I think the way that the commentators usually take it, Ruth, you were going to say?
I was to withstand
Remembers?
Nope. And not to take it on himself either, because that would just put us right into the Christian camp. But rather, I think the way Rashi does it on the pasuk is to say what it means is you envision one of the old style balances, one of the old style scales. So the sin was going to weigh it down, and God is nosei, He lifts it up so that it won't weigh down the other side.
For what reason?
In order to be able to keep us going, that we shouldn't be weighed down by the sin. But there's an idea here which is based in a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avos in the 4th parak says that every time one sins, he creates a kategor. A kategor, as Rashi there explains, as the Rambam there explains, and this is clearly pshat, it fits the Greek that the kategor is coming from, is that it's an agent who will testify against the sinner, a prosecutor. That's the literal read of what a kategor is. So every time a person sins, whatever they did in this world generates something that will be brought to bear against them when they have to stand trial one day for what they've done. But Rav Moshe Cordovero adds a dimension to it. He says kategor doesn't just mean this prosecuting angel. It means a destructive force. Take a look at number 14. Lo yasa ha'adam avon, shelo yivra mashchis. He says, I think the way to read it is, a person never sins without creating a destructive force. And they quote our Mishnah in Pirkei Avos that I just mentioned. However, avera achas kana lo kategor echad. You perform a transgression, you acquire a prosecutor for yourself. And he says, look, right? That prosecutor stands in front of God and says, so-and-so created me. Right? When they did whatever it was, they made me.
Created.
Yeah. But wait a minute, he says. Nothing can exist in this world without divine support. So what supports this destructive force as it stands before God? Logically, God should say, I'm not going to support any destructive beings. You go to the guy who made you. Let him support you. Take your energy from him. The destructive force would come kill the person. He would take his energy, so to speak. He would drain him to support himself. But God doesn't do that. There's the word again, sovel. God actually bears, He carries and endures this avera. Just like He supports the entire world, so He supports this destructive force. The idea here is that God is supporting, like we already said, He's supporting the person when the person sins, but He's even more so now. He is supporting the continued existence of the person who has sinned, and not saying, "Look, you sinned; you have to deal with it yourself." God is going to support him, as well. It reminds me very much the story which I may have told at some point here over the years, that I heard from Rabbi Yisachar Franz from Baltimore. Every year at my shul in Pennsylvania, we used to play the Tisha B'Av videos from the Chavetz Chaim Foundation. I never watched them, but there was one year, I don't remember why, I decided to watch it, and I learned this great story from our friend. He was talking about the issue of making shalom, of making peace. And he said, I'm not sure if I should give the idea first or the story first. I'll give the story first. The story was that a fellow came to him and told him that he orders the newspaper every morning. And every morning he, brings it in bright and early, and it's nice and crisp, and he has his morning coffee while he's reading the newspaper. I assume he goes to Minyan first, I hope. But one day he brings in the newspaper, and he can immediately see it's not folded right. Something is off. And then the next day again, something's not quite right. It's not creased the way it's supposed to be creased. And so the third day he gets up early and he watches out his window and he sees the paper boy drop off the paper, and then he sees the neighbor come over, take the paper, and sure enough, it's gone for like 20 minutes, and then the neighbor, brings it back and puts it on his doorstep. So he's steaming. And he comes to Rabbi Franz and he says, "What do I do?" What do you think Rabbi Franz's advice was?
Invite him for coffee. Read it together.
Rabbi Franz's advice was, buy him a subscription to the paper. Do not try this at home. This takes the right combination of neighbors, I think. But he says, buy him a subscription to the paper. Because if you're going to give him a hard time about it, every time you step out your door and he steps out his door, you're both going to be looking at each other and thinking about this. When there are issues about the lawn, or the kids left a toy, or the dog, or whatever it is, there's going to be such bitterness between you. You're much better off just getting him a subscription to the paper. And he said, call it Shalom Bayis money. That's what he said. He said, every person in their budget should have a certain amount of money that is allocated for Shalom. You have bought peace.
That's $600 a year.
You should read it online. You can print it out and fold it yourself if you like. Again, this is going to vary based on the people involved. You could end up offending him more by buying him a subscription. So be careful. Be careful about how you implement it. But I happen to love it because I think that it's very good advice for a whole host of situations having nothing to do with newspapers. Be willing to spend on Shalom. It is the best investment you're ever going to make. There you go. So, but in terms of this, I think of the person buying and the other person the paper as the nosei avon. You are essentially supporting him in it, and it's better for you to do that. You're better off that way than saying to him, you support your own avera, so to speak. So that's the second one. And then third, and this is very strong, he picks up on the language, go back to number 9 again, where it said, ve'over al pesha. So I translated over al pesha as that God overlooks transgression. He passes it by. Right? Which I thought was a reasonable translation. However, Rabbi Cordovero takes over like ma'avir. What is laha'avir? To remove it. To move it away. Laha'avir. To move it away. You could also do lahavir as to pass by something, but I'm using lahavir as when you remove something, and that's going to fit with the psukim that Rabbi Cordovero brings in this discussion. He says, Over al pesha means that God cleans up the sin himself, as opposed to waiting for you to clean up your mess. God will make things right in the world and not demand of you that you make things right. We're still supposed to, right? As part of the tshuva process, we have to repair what we've done wrong. But fundamentally, even if you don't, God will repair that which was done wrong. Take a look at number 15. God does not send a proxy to take care of this forgiveness. God does it himself. V'hainu ve'over al pesha, and that's what it means when it says he forgives sin, or he is over al pesha, he overlooks transgression, as I translated before. Sholeach meimei rechitza ve'over v'rochetz hapesha. He sends the cleansing water, so to speak, and forgives and washes away the sin. V'hinei mamash kidmus zet tzarach lios ha'adam. That's what a person has to be like. Not to say when somebody sinned against you, well, I should fix it. I should be the one to just forgive him, let him right the wrong, and then we'll have a conversation. Lo yomar kach. Ha'adam chotev HaKadosh Baruch Hu ba'atzmo shelo al-yedei shaliach metakenes me'uvaso v'rochetz tzohas avono. He says when a person sins, God himself, not via an agent, he is over al pesha, he does it directly, fixes that which the person corrupted and washes away the filth of that person's sin. So if somebody does something to you, lower the barrier for that person's tshuva. As Rabbi Cordovero continues to say, beyond the piece that I excerpted here, it will help the person not to sin again. Because when that person sees that you reached out to them, right, that you went that far to help them, even though they had done something against you, hopefully they will be moved by it. Now, I should note, the Ramah, Ramosha Isserlis, writes, if somebody hurt you in a way that cannot be repaired, right, the Lashon Hara is the classic example. You don't have an obligation then to forgive them. There are cases, I don't want to get too far into that example because it's not a great example to bring for a variety of reasons. The bottom line is that there are times when withholding forgiveness for a period of time is appropriate.
Thank you.
I said there are times. It didn't say all times. There are times when. But to me, what Rabbi Cordovero is trying to say here is that this is also part of emulating God. When we say, and this will sum up what we've said, when we say that we are created b'tzelem Elokim, meaning with the ability to emulate what God does, what that means here, we've only seen 3 out of the 13. I highly recommend seeing more of Tomer Devora. But first, the idea that we endure even if that person used the support we were giving them. Even in such a case, we have to be willing to bear it and to live with it. It means supporting this person even as they are sinning against you and not turning to them and saying, well, you're on your own, you do it yourself. And I recognize that first and second sound very similar, and I think there is a lot of overlap between them. And then third, being willing to go the step of cleaning up the sinner's mess ourselves and proactively coming after them to forgive them. Those steps are the steps that are necessary because it is ra'ui for us to emulate God, to look like God with the power of being b'tzelem Elokim. There's much more to say, but we'll stop here. I wish everybody a Gemar Chasima Tova for a year of health and of simcha and of shalom and bracha, and God willing we will resume Shmuel on October 11th. Thank you very much.